The internet feels like this huge open library, right? But behind the scenes, well, there are these constant quiet battles going on, fights over information, influence, what we end up believing.
Absolutely. It's a really complex space. You've got all sorts of actors, including state-backed ones,
Mm.
working constantly to shape what people see and, frankly, to gather intel.
Hmm.
And today, we're actually going to dive into some really fascinating reports from Google's Threat Analysis Group Tag. They're basically on the digital front lines, spotting and stopping this stuff.
Okay, tag. So what kind of digital skirmishes are we talking about? What have they been seeing lately?
Well, the reports from all through 2024, they really show quite a range. There are these big disinformation campaigns like one group they call DRAGONBRIDGE. That's a major one.
Dragon Bridge? Okay.
Then you've got really targeted cyber espionage, like the
Right.
Iranian group APT-42. They're big on sophisticated phishing.
Fishing, right.
And maybe the most worrying thing, we're seeing these advanced hacking tools getting reused, passed around maybe between different state groups.
Wow, okay. So our plan today is to really sort of get under the hood here, understand the scale, the tactics, what it means for, us trying to stay safe and informed online.
Exactly.
And this is all coming from Google Tags reports, Q1 through Q4 2024.
Precisely. Yeah, they give this incredibly detailed, like quarter-by-quarter view, who's doing what, how they're trying to
Oh,
do it. Let's maybe start with Dragon Bridge, because the sheer volume of what they do is just striking.
Dragon Bridge. Sounds pretty dramatic. So who are they? What's their deal?
Well, they're a pretty big influence network, linked pretty clearly to the PRC, the People's Republic of China.
Hmm.
Think of them almost like a massive spam factory, but for influence, operating across loads of different
A
platforms.
spam factory, so like digital junk mail, basically. Is that the idea?
In a lot of ways, yeah. I mean, most of what they churn out is actually pretty low-quality, non-political stuff, almost like background noise, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
But hidden in that flood, there's this smaller stream, but it's still significant, pushing pro-PRC angles on, different news topics.
So it's like overwhelming the space with noise. How much are we actually talking, like volume-wise?
It's huge. Google Tag says they've disrupted over 175,000 bits of their activity overall. Just in Q1 of 2024, they shut down over 10,000 operations linked to them. It's just massive scale.
That's incredible. But is anyone actually seeing this stuff? Is it, cutting through? Does it work?
That's the really interesting part. Despite this, like, insane output, they're actually really bad at getting real people to engage.
Huh.
Google looked at it in 2023, 80% of the YouTube channels they shut down, 0 subscribers.
Wow.
And 65% of the videos they took down had fewer than 100 views. So yeah, they're making tons of stuff, but it's like shouting into the void mostly.
So why bother? What's the point then?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Maybe it's just about creating this illusion of support. Or maybe they're just testing things, seeing what sticks, even if not much does.
Right. So, okay, within the stuff that is political, what kind of topics are they hitting?
Pretty broad. The Taiwan elections were a big focus for them.
Mm.
The Israel-Hamas conflict, lots on that. And yeah, criticizing the U.S., that's a constant theme.
Okay.
And while the main audience seems to be Chinese speakers, some of it does get put out in English and other languages too.
Sounds like they jump on headlines pretty quickly then.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Hmm.
They react fast to breaking news. Often the quality drops when they do that, seems rushed.
Mm-hmm.
But for things they know are coming, like the Taiwan election in 2024, they actually prepare stuff in advance, get it ready to go.
Okay, let's zoom in on that Taiwan election campaign. What were they doing there specifically?
Right, so leading up to the vote in January, there's this real spike in activity. Lots of videos, using robotic voices,
Hmm.
really generic stock photos and footage.
Yeah.
Translations were often pretty bad, like they just used machine translation. And they specifically targeted President Tsai Ing-wen with this, like, fake secret history story, really trying to discredit her.
And I think I read they were using AI in this too.
They were, yeah. Generative AI was definitely part of it. Tag saw these AI-generated news anchors reading out the narratives, trying to look like real news,
Right.
Production quality was all over the place. But it shows they're willing to experiment. And it's interesting, other researchers, like Graphica and Mandiant, they've confirmed DragonBridge has been playing with AI stuff since at least 2022.
But it didn't actually help them get more eyeballs.
Apparently not. Not in any meaningful way. So just using fancy AI tools doesn't automatically make your influence ops successful, it seems.
So the AI didn't make the messages land better. What else are they focused on? You mentioned U.S. social issues.
Yeah, they definitely keep an eye on what's happening in the U.S. socially, politically. Like the student protests over the Israel-Hamas war back in May 2024. They jumped on that.
How so?
Well, their content tried to paint the U.S. in a bad light, pointing out supposed hypocrisy, contrasting the U.S. response to those protests with how the West covered, say, protests in Hong Kong, trying to draw these often quite skewed comparisons.
Sounds like classic divide and conquer, trying to exploit divisions.
Yeah.
Did they do similar things in past U.S. elections?
They did, yeah. Back in 2020, 22, and 2020, they were critical of both candidates, actually.
Interesting.
And leading up to the 2022 midterms, they pushed stuff about political divisions, potential for violence, questioning if voting even works. But it's important, they haven't really explicitly backed one side or the other, more about stirring the pot.
And this isn't just YouTube, right? They're spreading this across different platforms.
Exactly. It's coordinated. Tag and others see the same narratives popping up on X, on Reddit, Instagram, Facebook, you name it.
Yeah.
Sometimes, like on X, maybe they try slightly more sophisticated things, fake personas, trying to engage a bit more. Get some slightly more engagement there, but still pretty limited overall.
Yeah.
The main strategy is just volume. Lots and lots of low-impact spam, basically.
Okay, so DRAGONBRIDGE. Loud, persistent, maybe not super effective, PRC linked. Let's switch gears to APT42. This sounds, I don't know, maybe more surgical, higher stakes?
That's a good way to put it, yeah. APT42, they're backed by the Iranian government, strong links to the IRGC, the Revolutionary Guard Corps, and their main game is highly targeted phishing attacks.
Okay, targeted. Who are they going after?
High-profile people, mainly, organizations that are strategically important to Iran, especially in Israel and the U.S.
Like who?
The government officials, current and former, people working on political campaigns, diplomats, researchers at think tanks, NGOs, academics working on foreign policy.
So the policy shapers, the influencers in international relations, where have they been focusing most recently, geographically?
Well, between February and July 2024, TAG saw about 60% of their targeting hitting the U.S. and Israel. That included people tied to both U.S. presidential campaigns and also former senior Israeli military figures. So, yeah, focusing right on key adversaries.
And how do they try to get in? What are the methods?
They're pretty clever about using legitimate services against targets. They use Google services themselves, Dropbox, OneDrive. They use them to host malware or set up fake login pages, phishing pages that look real.
Right.
And also for redirecting people to malicious sites. Google Tag is constantly fighting this, resetting accounts, warning targets, updating their detectors, blocking the bad domains and sites APT42 uses.
Can you give us some specific examples, like those campaigns against Israel?
Sure. So one tricky one involved Google Sites. They made pages look like a petition from the Jewish Agency for Israel.
Okay.
And to avoid detection, the text was actually embedded in images.
Okay.
Clever, right?
Yeah.
They use these ngrok redirect URLs, something APT42 has used before, to send people off to the real phishing site to steal their logins.
Sneaky.
Yeah.
What else?
Another tactic was sending emails, pretending to be journalists.
Yeah.
Targeting military folks, defense contractors, diplomats, academics, NGOs. And in June 2024, there was one using a PDF that looked harmless, impersonating a project called Project Aladdin. But hidden in the PDF was a shortened URL. Click that, and bam, you're at a phishing kit designed to grab your Google credentials.
So they're really playing on trust, using social engineering heavily.
Absolutely.
Wow.
That's key to how they work. They make fake accounts, registered domain names that look almost like real organizations people trust. Like they've pretended to be the Washington Institute for Near East Policy multiple times, using real researcher names but fake email addresses. They also do typo squatting, registering domains with tiny misspellings, like understandingthewar.org instead of the real Institute for the Study of War site, or Brookings.email trying to spoof the Brookings Institution. Little tricks like that.
When you mentioned U.S. elections, seems like they have an ongoing interest there, too.
Definitely. TAG's data shows they've been focused on U.S. election targets for a while now. They stopped APT42 trying to hit accounts linked to both the Biden and Trump campaigns back in 2020.
Right.
And in this current cycle, they've seen and disrupted more attempts. Small scale, maybe, but still targeting personal email accounts of people tied to both campaigns, current and former officials included. And if Google saw accounts were actually breached, they pass that info straight to law enforcement.
So they're actively trying to get access, not just watch.
Right.
What about those specific techniques, like around video meetings or sharing documents?
Yeah, they use different lures. A common one is suggesting a video call, then sending a link that goes to a fake login page instead of the meeting.
Ah, classic.
Or they send a harmless PDF first, build some trust, then try to get the target to chat on Signal or WhatsApp, Once they're there, they can share malicious links or try more social engineering to get info.
And they have actual tools like software kits to help automate this credential stealing.
They do, yeah. Phishing kits. One is called G Collection. It's pretty sophisticated, goes after Google, Hotmail, Yahoo accounts.
Hmm.
It even tries to get around multi-factor authentication, grab PINs, recovery codes.
Wow.
They also use a simpler one, kind of a browser in the browser kit, called DWP.
Sounds like they do their homework before attacking, too. Reconnaissance.
Oh, absolutely.
Hmm.
They dig through public info to find personal emails. They even try to figure out what security settings the target has, like what kind of second-factor authentication they use.
Uh-huh.
There's even evidence they look at the target's location to try and make their login attempts look more normal, less suspicious.
And if they do get in, what do they do to stay in?
A common move is adding their own recovery email addresses to the account and enabling app-specific passwords. That helps them keep access even if the real owner changes the main password. Google's Advanced Protection program actually helps block some of this, like revoking those app passwords if things look fishy.
Given everything going on, between Iran and Israel, seems likely this kind of activity is just going to continue, maybe even increase.
That's definitely the assessment, yeah. TAG expects to see more activity targeting Israel because of the ongoing tensions. And they think the focus on U.S. election-related people will keep going too. They really push high-risk folks to use their advanced protection program for extra security.
Makes sense. Good advice for anyone who might be a target. And tag usually includes the technical bits too, right? Indicators of compromise, domains, hashes.
Exactly. That stuff's really useful for security pros, researchers who want to track this. Which actually brings us nicely to the third big thing from these reports. This pattern of reusing hacking exploits. This is really interesting. Hints at maybe a leakage or sharing of these advanced tools.
Okay, exploit reuse. That sounds like it could be a pretty big deal. Who's reusing what and why does it matter?
So tags found cases where state-backed attackers, they suspect the Russian group APT29 and also these commercial surveillance vendors, companies like Intellexa and NSO Group, they've been using the same or very, very similar end-day exploits.
End-day exploits. Just remind us, those are vulnerabilities that are already known, maybe patched, right?
Yeah.
Not 0 days.
Exactly. Known vulnerabilities. And the specific case study here involves these watering hole attacks. They compromised some Mongolian government websites between late 2023 and mid-2024.
Watering hole, meaning they infect a site legitimate users visit.
Precisely. These official government sites were hacked to secretly load content from domains the attackers controlled.
And what happened when someone visited those infected sites?
Well, there were a couple of waves. In November 2023 and February 2024, they targeted iOS devices, delivering an exploit for CVE 2023-41993 that affected older iOS versions.
Yep.
And the interesting part, the payload, the thing delivered by the exploit, was this cookie stealing tool that's been linked to APT29 from way back in 2021. They just updated the list of websites they were targeting in the February attack.
So same tool, different campaign, and then Android.
Right. Then in July 2024, they switched focus to Android. If you visited on Chrome, you get redirected to an exploit chain hitting two different vulnerabilities, CVE 2024-5274 and CVE 2024-4671, designed to steal data from your Chrome browser.
Goal seems to be stealing data, but different methods for different phones. Can we get a bit more detail on the iOS attack? How did that work?
Sure. So if you visited one of these hacked Mongolian sites on an older iPhone or iPad, this hidden frame loads. First, it runs some code just to check out your device. Is it interesting enough?
Uh-huh.
If it is, then it downloads and runs the main WebKit exploit. And the main goal there was just grabbing browser cookies. It's worth noting, though, if you were up to date on iOS 16.7 back then or had lockdown mode on, you were safe in this specific one.
And this is where the link to the commercial guys comes in, Intellexa.
Exactly. The trigger, like the first bit of code that kicks off the exploit for CVE 2023-41993 used in these watering hole attacks, it was identical, like exactly the same, as the trigger Intellexa used in a totally separate case.
Wow. That's pretty strong evidence of a link, right?
It strongly suggests they got it from the same source.
Yeah.
Or maybe one copied the other very closely. There were tiny differences in how it handled errors, but the core activation part, the same.
So what exactly did this cookie stealer do once it was running?
Right. So this iOS exploit loads that cookie stealer framework, the one linked to APT29. It works by basically tricking the browser about where it is, manipulating web addresses. That lets it grab authentication cookies for a specific list of websites, big ones, usually, and send them back to the attacker. On newer iOS versions, it seemed to just grab all the cookies it could find.
Okay, now the Android attack, you said that was more complex.
Yeah, a bit more involved.
Hmm.
Probably because Chrome has this thing called site isolation, makes it harder to steal data from different websites with just one trick. So they used heavily disguised JavaScript code first.
Okay.
That injected the malicious iframe. Then there was this proper crypto key exchange, setting up secure communication. And the attack used two exploits chained together. CVE 2024-5274 to get inside the Chrome renderer part, and then CVE 2024-4671 to break out of the Chrome sandbox. You need both, usually.
And again, overlaps with the commercial vendors here too, NSO Group this time.
Yes,
Yeah.
that first vulnerability, CVE 2024-5274, NSO Group was apparently using that as a zero-day around the same time. Now, Tag notes the trigger code looks similar, but the actual exploit mechanics were different, and they targeted different Chrome versions. So similar starting point, maybe, but different paths.
Hmm.
And the second one, the sandbox escape, CVE 24-4671. That looks similar in concept to an older exploit Intellex had used before.
So it really looks like these exploits, maybe developed by or sold to these commercial companies first as 0 days, are then somehow ending up being used by state actors as N days later on.
That's the really concerning takeaway, yeah. We don't know exactly how they're getting them bought,
Yeah.
stolen, leaked, independently discovered. But it shows these powerful tools are spreading.
Yeah.
And also just shows that these watering hole attacks, they still work if people haven't patched their devices. The Android payload, by the way, Tag called it Androsnatch. It tried to delete crash reports to hide itself and then just hoovered up Chrome data cookies, saved logins, history, everything.
And the timing is key here, right? These N days were probably 0 days first, maybe used exclusively by the commercial vendors for a while.
Exactly. This reuse pattern strongly suggests that what starts as a 0 day, maybe in the hands of a company like Intellexo or NSO, later gets picked up and used as an end day by groups like APT29. The delivery might be different, the ultimate goal might be different, but the core exploit code, it seems to be shared, or at least showing up in multiple places.
So the big lesson here is really hammering home the need to update, update, update. Patch your stuff as soon as you can.
Absolutely critical. Tag really emphasizes that. Chrome site isolation helps, makes them need that chain of exploits, but it's not foolproof if the underlying vulnerabilities aren't patched.
Right. And again, Tag provides the technical IRC's indicators of compromise for researchers. Okay, so we've covered DRAGONBRIDGE, AT42, exploit reuse. To get a sense of the bigger picture, let's quickly touch on the overall scale Tag reported in their bulletins for the rest of 2024 Q2, Q3, Q4.
Yeah, those bulletins are really useful for just seeing the sheer volume of this stuff. Month after month, they report how many YouTube channels, blogger blogs, ads accounts, dodgy domains they've had to terminate or block because they were part of coordinated influence ops.
And the list of countries these ops are linked back to is pretty huge, right?
It really is. It's global. The reports mention operations linked to Indonesia, Myanmar, Philippines, India, though that looked more financially,
Right.
Pakistan, Russia, France, China, PRC, India again, Mexico, Argentina, but targeting Portugal, Bangladesh, Iran, Israel, Azerbaijan, Ecuador, the U.S. itself, the U.K., Cameroon, Moldova, Ghana, Germany, Ukraine. It's a long list.
Wow. That just drives home how widespread this is. What kind of themes were common across all these different campaigns?
Really varied, often matching the expected interest of the countries involved.
Yeah.
You saw pro-government content in places like Indonesia, Mexico,
Mm-hmm.
support for military rule in Myanmar, campaigns attacking politicians in Pakistan, France, Bangladesh.
Mm-hmm.
Russia consistently pushing pro-Russia stuff, anti-Ukraine, anti-West narratives.
Mm-hmm.
China doing similar, pro-PRC, anti-U.S. Taiwan elections.
Yeah.
Kept popping up for PRC-linked groups. Then you had things like criticism of Muslim immigration linked to Israel, Azerbaijan versus Armenia content, and lots of stuff around the U.S. elections coming from Russia, the U.K., Iran.
And the Israel-Palestine conflict, too, I imagine.
Oh, yeah, definitely, especially from Iran-linked operations.
Mm.
But it wasn't all big geopolitics either.
No. Like what?
Well, that financially motivated one from the Philippines, India, was just pushing stuff about food, sports, lifestyle. Weirdly, one link to the U.S. seemed to be trying to get people to run as independents. There were campaigns hitting minority groups in France, supporting a specific candidate in Moldova, backing a party in Germany, just a whole mix.
DRAGONBRIDGE, the Chinese network we started with, they were a regular feature in these bulletins throughout the year.
Absolutely. Their high volume just kept showing up in the reports. And it's worth mentioning, Tag often works with other platforms like OpenAI and Meta to track and take down these campaigns. It's a collaborative effort.
Mm.
And of course, these campaigns use all sorts of languages to try and reach people.
Just looking at the numbers of channels and accounts taken down each month, it really highlights the scale of the problem, doesn't it? Hundreds, sometimes thousands.
Exactly. The numbers, especially linked to Russia and the PRC, they just underscore how relentless these operations are and how much continuous effort it takes just to keep up with them.
So let's try and pull this all together. What are the main takeaways from this whole deep dive into what Google Tag's been finding?
Well, I think the clearest picture is that this landscape of state-backed influence and spying, it's persistent, it's constantly changing, evolving. The reuse of hacking tools is a really worrying trend, kind of blurs the lines between different types of actors.
Right.
And just the sheer amount of disinformation being pumped out,
Mm-hmm.
even if a lot of it doesn't get much traction, like DRAGONBRIDGE, the scale itself is a huge challenge for keeping online information reliable.
So for us, just regular people online, what's the bottom line? What should we be doing?
Critical thinking is just essential, more than ever. You've got to question what you see, look for different sources, be really wary of stuff that just seems designed to make you angry or afraid.
Uh-huh.
And practically, keep your software updated. Seriously. Patch everything, phones, computers, browsers. Be super cautious with links and email attachments, especially if they feel even slightly off. And yeah, if you are someone who might be a target journalist, activist, politician, look into things like Google's Advanced Protection Program. Seriously consider it.
Yeah. So when you think about how sophisticated this is getting, how interconnected it all seems, these digital threats, it really makes you wonder about the long-term impact, doesn't it, on democracy, on just our personal security online?
It really does. It's something we absolutely need to keep paying attention to. Understanding these tactics, how they're changing, it's really the first step,
Mm-hmm.
the crucial first step in figuring out how to deal with it all.